What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, Conspiracy Sundays, where every Sunday we talk about all things conspiracy-esque. You sit there, I sit here, and we get into it. Today, like every other Sunday, I have a good one for you guys. We're going to talk about crisis actors. But first, let's get into the case study. I just kind of want to explain what it is that I'm going to talk about, what it is that the key elements of it that you should probably understand, and then we're going to get into it. So the case study that I decided to look at for this week's episode is the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting conspiracy. Sandy Hook, as I'm sure you might have heard of, was a school shooting that happened December 14th, 2012 in Newtown, Connecticut. The perpetrator was Adam Lanza, who fatally shot his mother before murdering 20 students and 6 staff members at Sandy Hook Elementary School. There, he later committed suicide. It's a horrible one. It should have really been the bullet point, the end of any sort of pro-gun movement. I mean, I'm pretty sure a lot of the victims were under the age of 10. It's really horrible. And yet, people look at tragedies like that and they think they're crisis actors. And that is the case study, that is the conspiracy theory that I kind of want to unpack here. What are crisis actors, you might be asking? Well, over the past 10 years, obviously since Sandy Hook, there's been a growing online community of conspiracy theorists and hoaxers known as truthers that have come to question the official narrative behind every mass shooting that is heavily covered by the media. This Sandy Hook shooting is the one that we kind of want to focus on because crisis actors, or what people believe crisis actors are paid actors by the government to either act within or completely stage in American tragedies. And you might know the other tragedies as 9/11, Boston Marathon, or the Parkland shooting. Indeed, every time there is a mass shooting in America, crisis actors is something Googled. It actually increases drastically the day after. But where did this term originate? The first use of it, and this is why we kind of want to focus on Sandy Hook, coincidentally, or if you're a conspiracy theorist, you'd say that it wasn't coincidental at all. The first time we see the phrase is actually in Denver, Colorado, where there was a company that was offering services of a group of actors who were available nationwide for active shooter drills, mall shooting, full-scale exercises, and they would bring intense realism in a public space. And this is probably where I should interject and say that yes, crisis actors are a real thing. It is not just a way of thinking. It's not something that just conspiracy theorists believe. And this is one of the many conundrums of conspiratorial thinking. It is this fragmented piecing together of different truths to make a false reality. And as it happens, this press releasement or ad or whatever you want to call it in Denver, Colorado was released weeks before Sandy Hook. So it literally was irrelevant. It was a blip on the timeline, and then Sandy Hook happened. And this is the kind of piecing together that happens with conspiracy thinking, is that you have one thing, you have another thing completely unrelated, and you make the dots yourself. As a wider general framework for understanding this, we need to understand what false flag theory is. What is a false flag operation? As many things, it operated within the military. It was the deliberate deception or use of a false flag in order to deceive another person, or obviously an army. The most common example that you and I might know of, the most known example that you and I might know of is the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which obviously was when the US lied, deceived us, and said that they'd been attacked in order to expand the Vietnam War. And this is how conspiracy thinking operates, and is a key thing to understand, is that they are not completely out of touch from reality. The chain of reasoning has to start somewhere. There has to be something that someone sees and they think, that's not quite right. And indeed, the idea of a false flag attack is intuitively plausible because people have the sense that politicians will take advantage of a crisis as pretext to advance their political goals. I mean, this happens all the time. I'm sure you and I might look at the Tory government right now and think, hey, this doesn't appear to be above board. And that is the kind of thinking that goes ahead before someone believes in a conspiracy theory. They might think hey, I love guns, I'm pro-guns. What extent is the American government going to go to? I mean, they already lied in the Gulf of Tonkin incident. They invaded Iraq because a couple thousand, do you know what I mean? It's that kind of thinking where they try and justify one thing through another. They try and say that because they've done this thing, what else are they capable of? And it's that kind of questioning that leads them to change their whole worldview. If one thing is true, another thing is true. And to understand this better, we kind of do need to define what a conspiracy theory is. Now, conspiracy theory as a connected term, obviously conspiracy and theory existed separately, but as a conspiracy theory as a term was popularised by philosopher Sir Karl Popper in the 1950s. And in general, conspiracy theories have a pretty bad rep. To call something a conspiracy theory is to imply that it's false. That the people who believe it or who would like to investigate it are rational people. They're not perceiving the world the way it is. You're a conspiracy theorist. You're an idiot. Tends to be the way it goes. They are widely held to not only be false and the products of irrationality, but they are harmful. And that is what we will see with the crisis actors, or the way that people engage with crisis acting as a conspiracy theory, how they engage with wider society. It is a harmful rhetoric. We'll get into it. But it's not just like a silly little belief system. Like, say me, for example, I look at the royal family and I think, hey, maybe something weird happened with Princess Di. Maybe the Queen had something to do with that. But that doesn't mean I'm going out and attacking anyone that's a monarchist, or having these like horrific conversations with people and saying that like, hey, like you're faking your child dying. Do you know what I mean? Like there's like steps to conspiratorial thinking, and crisis acting tends to be up at the top in the way that they engage with society. Because school shootings happen as often as they do, it kind of incentivizes people to take action in a way that other conspiracy theories doesn't necessarily have. Like, because I think from my research, there's been 611 school shootings this year. So every time there's school shootings, 611 mass tragedy shootings. So every time that happens, someone who believes that crisis actor is a thing, that this like the government is a false flag operation, that like wake up people, we need to see this, they are going to engage with their family members, with victims of the shooting, with those in their community, and they're going to try and convince them of this rhetoric. And that is where it's harmful. It is the harassment of victims, it's the harassment of medical professionals, of government officials, to try and convince them that their viewpoint is correct. You may think that conspiracy thinking is a recent thing, obviously with COVID-19, how people believe that the vaccine, I almost called it a microchip, that the vaccine was a microchip by the government in order to gain control of us. Obviously, conspiracy thinking predates COVID-19. And whilst it's not always political in nature, it tends to be. And there's this thing that we like to call circular reasoning, which is basically, as I kind of just touched upon earlier, it tends to be that if one thing is true, you're more inclined to believe other things are true. And if one conspiracy theory is true, anyone that tries to debunk that conspiracy theory is in on it. And this comes up again and again with the Sandy Hook elementary school shootings. Sandy Hook elementary school shooting conspiracy theory is that anyone that comes to them and says, hey, what's up? What are you believing right now? You're in on it. So if they believe that, say, medical professionals didn't respond in time, they didn't arrive in time, which is a Sandy Hook elementary conspiracy theory, they're like, there were no paramedics there because there are no dead bodies, and a nurse comes forward and she says, hey, like, I was there, I treated the kids, like, what do you mean? They will go online and they will try to debunk that this person isn't even a nurse. This person probably doesn't even live in the state. And it's this kind of like belief system that justifies itself, where if anyone tries to prove you wrong, they're in on it. And that's why it's so dangerous, is because there's no way out. There is no way to rationalize this. There's no way to debunk it. Because if you try to debunk it, you're in on it. And this is because conspiracy thinking actually satiates a lot of our human needs. We have an epistemic need, we have a social need, and we have an existential need. And crisis actors actually fulfill a few of these. There's only 3, so at least 2. The epistemic need is what I kind of want to focus on, and it is this looking for truth, to know what happened. And this is something that other scholars have touched upon. I'm going to bring in Stephen Lewensky right now, because he's spoken about crisis actors a lot. I believe he is a professor of conspiratorial thinking at Bristol University, and he's kind of spoken about this. For those who believe in crisis actors, he actually spoke in an interview to Vice News, a YouTube video. I will link it. For those who believe in crisis actors, it is like a comfort blanket. You're replacing a horrible tragedy with the assumption that maybe the government is just evil. It answers the question, the epistemic need, how did this happen? How can we prevent it? This is indeed one way of thinking when it comes to crisis actors. Another is more in line with other conspiratorial beliefs. The government has too much power and is trying to take something from us. This consensus holds true for a lot of people who believe, let's say, COVID-19 is a microchip or the vaccine being fake or whatever, and they try and justify conspiratorial thinking because they believe that someone else has too much power. For crisis actors, conspiracy believers, this is their get out of jail free card. They fear that the government is staging these tragedies to justify repealing the Second Amendment right, and appealing this terrifies them, and therefore they argue for greater autonomy on their weapons. So whilst, as I said, not all of them are political in nature, this one is. And whilst other scholars have definitely discussed how conspiratorial thinking, Hofstadt, is an international issue, not necessarily an American one, this one is definitely an American one, because I don't know any other nation that has the same amount of mass tragedies and mass shootings that America does, and has this kind of conversation that happens after them. This is definitely a uniquely American issue, to look at something as horrible as Sandy Hook crisis, Sandy Hook shooting, and think, they're acting, the kids didn't die. I don't know. It baffles me. But so that's the epistemic need, and it fills our social need to belong. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to link the video in this just because of copyright issues, but I'm going to link the video that I'm talking about. There was an interview as part of a wider thing done by Vice News about crisis actors, and they interviewed a man in Florida who believed that the Parkland shooting was crisis actors, it was conspiracy, it's a fake. And he says, like, candidly to the camera, oh, I can't really talk about this with, like, my friends and family because, you know, they're, like, involved. As in, like, they had either friends or relatives or their children were shot in the Parkland shooting. So we obviously can't talk to them about, like, hey, like, this is fake. Because his immediate close friends and family will be like, what is wrong with you? But he goes online, and this desire to belong, this desire to have, like, a group or someone else or an echo chamber is a driving force behind conspiratorial thinking. It is this, like, confirmation that the way that you engage with the world, someone else also engages in the world in that way. And he said, he was like, oh, like, I go on these Facebook groups, I find these Reddit forums, and I talk to them about how I feel, these conspiratorial beliefs. And it's an echo chamber. It radicalizes people. I mean, arguably January 6th couldn't have happened without Facebook. I mean, even some of the conspiracy theories around Brexit couldn't have happened without Facebook. Facebook sent to my issue here. But anyway, it fulfills, conspiratorial thinking fulfills the social need to belong and existential needs as well. The people who feel more insecure, they are more likely to believe in conspiracy theories. And we definitely see this with crisis acting and conspiracy theories within America. Studies have been done that dictate that Democrats and Republicans both believe in conspiracy theories, and it tends to correlate with whichever party the opposition party is in power. So say right now Biden's in power, Republicans are more inclined to believe in conspiratorial thinking. However, gun rights and gun issues tend to be a more Republican issue. The only time that Democrats are engaged with gun rights is when they're like, let's reform, let's take them away. I know that's a brief generalization. I'm not saying that every Democrat behaves that way, but saying that we need more guns tends to be something that a Republican would say. Therefore, I'm going to say that Republicans tend to believe more in this conspiracy theory than any other political party in America. And whilst Hofstadt did conclude that this isn't an American issue, I want to just bring up the paranoid style, because it's important to understanding the world viewpoint that those that believe in crisis actors might have. And he basically discussed how it's not the characteristics of a conspiracy theory, but it is this curious leap in imagination that is always made at some crucial point in the recital of events, and this is important for Sandy Hook. He concludes that it's not an American problem, but an international one. And it is someone that with like a panic person and personal persecution. So they believe that something is being taken from them and they're worried about it. And with this, it is gun rights. And the way that they view the world is that they have a leap in their judgment. So for Sandy Hook, they see the Denver, Colorado press statement, and then they see Sandy Hook and they're like, let's bridge the gap. Obviously, it's a complete falsehood. It's completely fake. And yet people believe it. I was going to go into the Sutherland Springs shooting, but I would rather discuss Sandy Hook right now just because I am 14 minutes in and I did not realise that. So now that we've understood the framework with which people engage with crisis actors, with conspiracy thinking, with false flag theory, we can now look at a case study, the Sandy Hook shooting. And as I kind of already discussed, when it happened, what happened, the tragedy that it was, the people that died, we now have to see how people engage with it. And as I kind of already touched upon, there tends to be a negative viewpoint of conspiracy theories, that they're a problem, they're a societal problem, and I'm going to stress again that this one is a societal problem. If you believe in crisis actors and you engage with the world in the way that like crisis actors engage, like it's crazy. Alex Jones would literally, okay, so that's why I wanted to bring up Sutherland Springs. So Sutherland Springs was a shooting that happened in Texas in a church, and they were also interviewed by news agencies. I'm going to link it below. And you can see in the video those that believe, the truthers that believe in crisis actors, ringing up families of the bereaved, victims of the bereaved, those that lived opposite the road of where the shooting happened at this Baptist church, and harassing them, telling them that their relatives didn't die, asking them for proof that they died. One of the interviews that he gave, one of the videos, it's in his YouTube. I think he's been arrested now for harassment. He said that he was going to exhume the body of this woman's dead daughter or dead niece. And it's things like that. That's where it's harmful. That's where it's so like... But anyway, the Sandy Hook shooting was initially, the more common conspiracy theory was adopted initially by James H. Fetzer and James Tracy, and it was further popularised by Alex Jones, who I think I've already touched upon. He's currently, I think, about to go to jail and pay like $1 billion in, I was going to say severance pay, but I can't think of the word right now. Payment, because he did something wrong. The thing that happens in court, I cannot think of the word. Anyway, they believed that it was classified training exercises involving members of the federal and local law enforcement, the news media, and crisis actors, and they claimed it was modelled on Operation Closed Campus, an Iowa school shooting drill that was cancelled in 2011 amid threats and public outcry. Jones himself described the shooting incident as synthetic, completely fake actors, in my view, manufactured, and it shows how bold they are that they clearly used actors. And this is where you can see that they got the link from the Denver, Colorado publishing and Sandy Hook, and they thought, bam, like this is the link, this is clearly how they think. And there's no evidence to support these conspiracy theories. And they make a number of implausible claims. A lot of the claims that they make contradict one another. It's interesting that they mention the media, because one of the key things that we have to understand with conspiratorial thinking with Sandy Hook in particular is that the reporters on the scene fell victim to what we call the 24-hour news cycle, in which, because broadcasting agencies are so on it, they want to report all the time, they want to be the first ones on the scene, you know, Sky News versus BBC, ITV, whoever. I'm trying to think of, like, you know, like Fox versus CNN, classic rivalry. They want to be the ones that report, as like insidious as it sounds, they want to be the ones that report the school shooting. They want to be the ones that are saying it. They want families across America to turn the news and see their broadcasting agencies, and that leads them to report things that aren't necessarily true. They do not fact check. And the thing is, when they don't fact check, they say things like, okay, so we're on the scene, this is what's happening, we've just been told that X, Y, and Z has happened, we're telling you, obviously this needs to be like further authenticated. And what crisis actor conspiracy theory believers don't do is then say, okay, so they've said that this needs to be checked further and that like more updates will come, this is an ongoing crisis, like let's just wait for the full story. They will take that they said X, Y, and Z, and for the case of Sandy Hook, X, Y, and Z is originally there was allegedly 2 shooters, and then later it turned out to be just one, obviously Adam Lanza. And they were like, oh, well, the media said there was 2 earlier and now it's 1. So like, which one is it, guys? Like, you're lying. Rather than believe that like the media maybe made a mistake because they're like desperate to get the story out as quickly as they can, they assume that everyone is in on it and everyone is lying. And the person that tends to be associated most with this, obviously Alex Jones, but the people that tend to perpetrate the people that are orchestrating the false flag operation is obviously United States government, and the clear link here is new gun legislation, and that is true for either the Sutherland Springs shooting or Sandy Hook or Parkland, is that every time a mass tragedy like this happens, people are calling for gun reform, which is good. We should have that. And yet conspiracy theorists are like, well, no, this is like against our wishes. They said the attack is being used by politicians to push through new gun control legislation, which in a way, I can understand why they believe that that is true, but obviously, in my opinion, that's not a bad thing. Like, I'm not saying that that's wrong, but to say that the attack was orchestrated deliberately to cause that is obviously where... So it's like, you can have a tragedy and use it for your own, like, political means to safeguard the rest of the citizens in your nation, but to say that you're orchestrating it in order to do so, that is where the issue lies. A really famous quote by Laura and dentist, Orly Tates, best known for her promotion of Barack Obama not being US born, was quoted saying, was Adam Lanza drugged and hypnotized by his handlers to make him into a killing machine as an excuse, as the regime is itching to take all means of self-defense from the populace before the economic collapse? Let me just read that again. Was he drugged and hypnotized by his handlers, presumably the US government, to make him into a killing machine as an excuse, as the regime is itching, regime being the US government, to take all means of self-defense? I take issue with that one, because why do you need an AR-15 for self-defense? You don't. And this is one of the interesting things about those that are against gun reform in general, or gun control, or that believe that, like, gun reform does not necessarily mean that every single gun is being taken away from you, nor does it imply that, like, you're suddenly, like, the US government are going to barge in through your door and take every gun you own. It just means that there's going to be more stringent checks to prevent tragedies like this happening, or it means that there's not going to be semi-automatic weapons available for every 18-year-old to buy. And this is especially true for the Sutherland Springs shooting, because the perpetrator in that shooting, it happened in 2017, he fired onto a church. He had priors, he had domestic abuse cases against him. He should not have been allowed to buy a gun, and yet something went wrong, the I's and T's were not dotted, he did not get flagged up on the system, he was allowed to buy a gun. So as a result of that, Texas passed a myriad of gun reform laws to make sure that those with domestic abuse priors cannot buy the guns that he was able to buy. And it's not necessarily them pushing an agenda, but it's more so them trying to prevent these tragedies from happening. And for some reason, conspiracy theorists cannot comprehend this. So that is one of the conspiracy theories. They believe that the government is behind it. The second one is Operation Closed Campus. They claim that the shooting, as I just mentioned, was a training exercise by the Department of Homeland Security to train, it's a long list, state and local police, prosecuting attorneys, emergency radio operators, emergency medical personnel, local doctors and hospitals, the Red Cross, medical examiners, news reporters, and crisis actors. So that was actually what was going to go on in the campus in Iowa, but they cancelled it. I don't know why they cancelled it. What I do know is that people saw something like this and believed that this one must have been that, which once again, I'm not sure how they made that link. However, one of the more interesting ones, Jesus, I did not know this. Okay, so apparently Press TV, the official state media outlet of Iran, promoted several anti-Semitic conspiracy theories blaming Israeli death squads for the shooting. TV interviewed Veterans Today, Gordon Duff, who quoted the former Republican candidate who asserted the Israeli death squad's claims. Okay, so there's an anti-Semitic angle for this, which I did not know. What I was actually going to talk about instead of that, sorry, research coming as we're doing this, was actually that there's many different kids that are involved with the Sandy Hook that unfortunately lost their lives, and it's this died again conspiracy theory. So there was one girl, I'm hopefully going to have the images here, who was wearing this red and black dress, and Obama came to visit the Sandy Hook children, those that survived, and there's another girl, also blonde, wearing a very similar dress. And they believe that this girl and her parents are faking it. And they later analysed interviews that the girl's parents gave. And this is a key component of why people believe in crisis actors, is that human beings are not rational. They do not behave the way that we assume that they would. They do not act like... Well, here's the thing, you can't act rationally when you're going through a tragedy. And they believe that, you know, people that have just lost their children or just lost their wives or whoever during all of these mass tragedies, whether it be 9/11, Boston shooting, Parkland, Sandy Hook, that they are going to be crying constantly, they are going to be distraught, they are going to be morose, inconsolable, and obviously they are, but when they are giving interviews, they need to be present, they need to be engaging, they need to tell their story. Maybe they'll laugh, maybe they'll be happy before they give the interview. And they take these little snippets of bereaved parents smiling before they give the interview, before being serious on camera, or talking about their child on camera and laughing and being happy and remembering all of these like details about their kids, and they're faking it. Because they believe, because their worldview does not align with how people are acting, and therefore the people are acting. Like, that is the justification. There's nothing else apart from that. So now we're going to get into Alex Jones' claims, because I believe he is the pivotal one behind this before I wrap this up, because we've kind of discussed the framework for which people will view any school shooting or mass tragedy, and then why Sandy Hook in general, and I just want to examine some of the ones that Alex Jones has before we wrap this up, just because I'm worried about time. But anyway, in September 2014, conspiracy theorist Alex Jones, who runs the website InfoWars, which I'm sure we all know about, previously claimed that the murderers were false flag attacks perpetrated by the government. So it's that same theory that keeps coming up again and again, is false flag theory. He asserts that no one died at Sandy Hook Elementary School because the uniform crime reports show no murders in Newtown for 2012 and that the victims were child actors. So this has been debunked by an FBI report. In reality, the Connecticut State Police was the lead investigator after the attack, and the Sandy Hook victims were included in Connecticut statewide records, not Newtown. In November 2016, the school principal, pardon me, Erica Lafferty, daughter of Dawn Lafferty, the school principal who was shot and killed at Sandy Hook, wrote open letters to then President Donald Trump-elect, calling upon him to denounce Jones after Trump had appeared on InfoWars during his presidential campaign and lavished praise on its presenter, saying that the conspiracy theorist had an amazing reputation and pledging not to let him down. On February 20th, 2017, the Newtown School Board wrote to President Trump urging him to recognise the murders of 26 people at Sandy Hook and to remove your support from anyone who continues to insist that the tragedies were staged or not. Trump did not respond to the letter. Trump, obviously, as we know, then became president. So this, again, adds to the circular reasoning. It adds to this, like, perception of reality, this altered sense of what is real and what is not, because they can then sit there and say, well, Trump didn't write back. Like, I thought that, like, he's the president. He's, like, the utmost authority. And even though he didn't say anything, he gave credence to their belief systems. He authenticated it by not saying anything. Even though he did nothing, he did something. And it's despicable. And then the last bits of research that I have is obviously 2 victims of the shooting sued Jones in Texas County Court, and obviously 6 families also sued him, and he is currently about to go to jail, which is good. So with the Sutherland Springs shooting, we saw that the 2 people interviewed for that one were graffitiing on the church, graffitiing on the memorial, removing images of the bereaved, all of these things, because they believe that they weren't real. They believe these people didn't die. In this article, it says how a Newtown resident was reported for having sheltered 6 Sandy Hook students and a bus driver in his home during the shooting, has been subject to harassment online, alleging he was complicit in the government cover-up, among other things. Many different memorial dedicated to the victims has been defaced. Many people have been arrested, obviously, in response to these defacements, but that doesn't stop the, like, individual harassment of the parents, nor does it stop the circulation of videos online. Oftentimes, people will create these, like, debunking school shootings, debunking this thing. It especially happened after the Parkland shooting, because one of the issues with the Parkland shooting that people had was that David Hoggs was put together and he was ready, and he was a child that had gone through this tragedy, but he was able to articulate himself the way an adult would. And he has said many times, he's like, I have journalist skills, like, I know what I'm supposed to do. And when he does the things that he knows that he's supposed to do in an interview, like be courteous or smile or take a selfie or like whatever, people are like, oh, like, he's acting, he's faking it. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, it's circular reasoning. Anything that they see can link up. I mean, other scholars have discussed this. We can see it with Sandy Hook. I mean, I'm sure there's an article somewhere by a conspiracy theorist that says, like, hey, Donald Trump did not acknowledge. I mean, it's crazy. The president did not acknowledge that 26 people died. Of course people are going to believe that this conspiracy theory exists because, like, it justifies it. Anyway. So, I clearly get very riled up with the subject. What we have to understand is that there are a myriad of ways as to how someone will engage with conspiracy thinking, and there are myriad ways that can justify it, circular reasoning. It sustains our epistemic needs, social needs, and existential needs, and it is a comfort blanket. And Crisis Actors does all of these things. If you believe in crisis acting, it answers the question, how did we let this happen? How can we stop it? And at the root of all tragedies, somewhere inside, even the people harassing the victims, they have this need to fix a societal problem, this burning desire to want the world to be better. And that is the driving force behind, unfortunately, them harassing the victims, them creating all of these, like, videos online and interviewing all of the fellow people that think the way they do and echoing these echo chambers, is that they believe that they see the world, they believe they have this eureka moment and they see the world entirely differently to how you and I, we're blind, we haven't woken up yet, and they're trying to help. unfortunately, it doesn't help. Unfortunately, it's completely unfounded and completely irrational. But that is why they believe that crisis actors are a thing. And at the heart of it, they are scared. They are people on the fringes of society who believe that the government who have done false flag operations, who in other cases have done or were about to do crisis acting as a thing, like as an implemented thing at another campus, they believe that they are deliberately doing it to repeal gun laws. They see politicians behave in a way that is, what's the word I'm looking for? Capitalizing off of a political issue to assert their own goals. And whilst you and I might look at that and think, well, of course, there was a mass shooting, of course they're going to try and implement some gun reform. They look at that as an infringement on their rights, an infringement on their autonomy, and it scares them. And that is how conspiracy thinking happens, because people are scared, they're afraid, and they look at the world and it doesn't make sense, and they don't like the fact that it doesn't make sense, so they create their own justifications for why it doesn't make sense. They create their own rationalities and they create their own new reality. It's true for Sandy Hook, it's true for crisis actors, it's true for false flag theories, and they all link together. You can trace it back to 9/11. People believe that that was fake. I'm not sure which is the most famous shooting of this year, but I'm sure there's people believing that that's a fake conspiracy theory too. So I hope, take away from this video, hopefully I'm able to edit this and put photos in, but I hope you're able to understand what happened at Sandy Hook, why people believe in this type of conspiracy theories, what crisis actors actually are, and how it all kind of links together. I hope I did a good job in explaining it, because I have been talking for half an hour, and this was my second take. The last time I got to 25 minutes and then I was like, I don't like the way I phrase stuff. So yeah, tune in next week where we are going to talk about Princess Diana, because I mentioned it. Have a nice night, guys. Goodbye.